Um, okay, so I think most of you know Rick Conti. Rick is an accredited personal property appraiser by the American Society of Appraisers. He also holds their appraisal review designation. He's the assessor in the city of Taunton and also does real estate appraising as well as personal property appraising. But today he's coming in here to share his expertise on personal property. Now, I'm going to ask, can everybody see the screen that I've shared?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, enough nods. Okay, I feel good about that. So, Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you. You just have to clue me in as to when you want me to move slides around, okay?
Thank you. So, welcome to How Do We Value Personal Property? I know that I am talking to accomplished real estate appraisers, and that intrigues me because I really enjoy sharing my knowledge with other appraisers. I am involved in real estate as an assessor. I'm involved in personal property as a private practice, and I'm involved in appraisal review um, in both disciplines, which is even more exciting than the disciplines themselves. The Today we're going to talk about an inside look of what the personal property appraiser does to find evidence and support value in writing an appraisal report. So on the next slide, Steve, I want to show you what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the differences between real estate and personal property. There's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences. But everything both of us do is all about building evidence to support an argument that will convince the audience that our valuation is credible. And of course, that's what the standards are all about. And many of you teach USPAP, so I'm not going to dwell on that very much. The supporting documentation is just as important in personal property as it is in real estate. And in the case of personal property, the diversity of the things that we might be appraising makes the supporting documentation a little bit more important. And you're going to see that today because I'm going to show you actual appraisal reports of personal property. And I am shocked at how many assignments I get from attorneys. And the attorneys tell me that they've never seen a personal property appraisal report before. That's pretty scary, especially in divorces. And that's what I do. My practice in personal property specializes in litigation support. So I do a lot of divorces. I do a lot of insurance cases. I do a lot of charitable contribution reports for the Internal Revenue Service for substantial tax deductions. And I do estates, which is becoming less and less of a volume as the estate levels rise, both on the federal and the state level. But my appraisal reports are all full of supporting documentation and evidence of valuation because I plan on defending them in front of a judge. The whole purpose of writing a narrative appraisal report, as you know, is to inform the reader of the value characteristics that you're looking at and how those value characteristics play into a final valuation. And of course, the reconciliation and the conclusion becomes the best part of the appraisal report. So Steve, on the next slide, we're going to talk about USPAP in real estate and in personal property because we both are subject to the exact same standards. They're just written a little slightly different. So the next slide, I show you real estate on the left and personal property on the right. We both have ethics rules. We both have record keeping rules. We both have competency rules, the scope of work. You have a jurisdictional rule, which really doesn't apply in personal property. But your standard 1 looks just like my standard 7. Your standard 2 looks just like my standard 8. And on the next slide, let's take a look at standards 1 and 7 because they say the same thing in real estate as they do in personal property. And what's important is, as you know, identify the problem to be solved, and come up with a scope of work to be able to resolve the problem. So on the next slide, standard 1 and 7, the same criteria that applies to real estate appraisers applies to personal and property appraisers. And this is where we start to see a little separation, because in real estate, you have a very specific path to become a real estate appraiser and an accomplished real estate appraiser to get a license. In personal property, there is no license law. Anybody can call themselves a personal property appraiser and do. So we have antique dealers running antique stores who do appraisals. We have jewelers selling jewelry that call themselves appraisers. We have dealers that are in the business of buying and selling that call themselves appraisers, which really confuses the marketplace. And it causes a lot of issues. And those issues sometimes wind up in court. And that is when I have the most fun, because I find it to be intriguing when a person who is on the fringe of the trade finds themselves in court defending their opinion of value in front of a trier of fact, which is a judge, sometimes with a jury, and they don't know what they're talking about. My job in expert witness testimonies, just like yours, if you've ever testified in real estate, is to be able to educate the judge, educate the jury on how the standards apply to our work and how we execute our work so that we can come up with a credible conclusion. So this whole standard of being aware, understand, and correctly employ those recognized methods and techniques is a real understatement in personal property. In real estate, because you follow such a specific track to get to where you are and to get your license, it's a little bit more defined. So what we find is that in personal property, on the next slide, Steve, you see that sometimes we're dealing with the wild, wild west, that people can call themselves an appraiser and render an appraisal in a careless and negligent manner and wind up in court, and it gets to be embarrassing. The biggest issues typically start with the next slide. It's in the problem identification. Why are you writing an appraisal report? And it's a question I ask everybody who calls me for an assignment, because the engagement letter that I mail out identifies that problem identification, why you're engaging an appraiser, and what you expect to see as a result of engaging the appraiser. And I like to know, and a lot of people call me on behalf of others. I would say 80% of the people who call me are attorneys, and they're representing a client. And other times I find myself being called by people who are the wife of the personal representative, or the secretary to a business person who's got an issue, or someone who's asking on behalf of somebody else. And I really need to talk to the client. I really need to talk to the intended user. I really need to educate the intended user and find out what the problem is so that I can come up with a scope of work. The scope of work in personal property probably varies as much as real estate. And on the next slide, Steve, we can see that we build evidence just like you build evidence. We go out and we find the value characteristics, and those value characteristics will change with each classification. You don't value residential property the way you value commercial property. In residential property, you don't value a ranch the same way you vary exactly the way that you value colonial. And where you go to get the information varies greatly too in real estate versus personal property. On the next slide, we can see in real estate on the left-hand side, you're going to the registry of deeds, the Banker and Tradesman's, the MLS, CoStar, Crexi, Price Waterhouse Cooper, assessor records. We don't do any of that in personal property. We are in eBay, on Etsy, in Amazon. eBay is an amazing resource of information in personal property. I forget the figures, but it's something to the effect of $23 billion a year in volume. 80% of which is in the United States. But they are selling $150 million worth of product a minute. What? And it's all accessible to the personal property appraiser on eBay. So when you go onto eBay, on your opening screen, on the upper right-hand corner, there's a little tab that says Advanced Search. And you click on that Advanced Search, and you enter in the next screen, whatever it is you're looking for, and scroll down and click on the box that says Sold and Completed Items. And what's going to come up is everything that's sold on eBay in the last 30 days. Pages and pages and pages and pages of completed sales. Some of them are offerings where someone put an item on eBay and they're trying to sell something, so they have a buy it now price, and some of them don't sell. So what you're looking for on eBay is you're looking for items that got 2 or more bids, and they list on the item as you go looking for things 2 or more bids. So right now at home you've got something that you want to sell that's in your way. So you took a bureau and you put it in your garage because you're not using it anymore and you'd like to get rid of it. Go on eBay, go on to advanced searches, type in bureau, local delivery only, find out what's sold in your market in the last 30 days for a bureau. Try to find one that looks something like what you've got, and you've got a good indication of what the value of that bureau is, or television, or diamond ring, or stereo equipment, or whatever it is that you have to sell. eBay is an amazing marketplace, as is Invaluable and Live Auctioneers. I think I probably use Live Auctioneers more than anything else that you see on the screen, but I do a lot of art, so I am on ArtNet, ArtFact, ArtPrice, and art blogs a lot, looking at art. And I'm in Hallmarks all the time, looking at silver and jewelry and Hallmarks on gold. I own about 3,000 books in my library. I just paid $350 for 3 books on international jewelry hallmarks because they're not on the internet. If you tried to find a gold hallmark from Iran on the internet, you're not going to find it. The same is true of any particular deep dive into a special classification. I spent $1,500 for the Encyclopedia of Sandwich Glass. I bought a book on Connecticut colonial furniture for $350. Those books are very, 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 very low print runs. They're not on, the contents are not on the internet, and they become incredible resources to me, depending on the assignment. I just did an assignment for MIT, and I needed to find out what was the chemical composition of the colors used on Majolica ceramics in the 15th century. So I went into the library, the Taunton Public Library. They have a sales network. Amazing, amazing. I found all the chemical composition of all the colors of all the used on Majolica in Italy in the 15th century to match what is sitting in the hallway of one of the MIT buildings. Other resources that personal property appraisers use are on TinEye for reverse imagery. Sometimes when we are looking at something, we don't know what it is because it's impossible for any human being to know everything ever made by civilization in the history of civilization. Forget it. Nobody knows that. God knows that. So it takes a researcher to be able to know where to go to look. And TinEye is amazing. It'll give you a reverse image of 7.1 billion images. So if you don't know what it is, you take a picture of it, you go on TinEye, you show them what the picture is, and bingo, you get a clue of what you're looking at. So on the next slide, I've isolated, what is the personal property appraiser looking at? And the classification breaks down very similar to real estate. The type of object is, just like the type of real estate. Are we looking at land? We're looking at commercial? We're looking at residential? Well, in this case, are we looking at sculpture? We're looking at books? We're looking at art? And what is the size of it? What are the materials? What are the techniques? What are the inscriptions, the markings, the date, the period, the maker, the subject or title? And this list that you're looking at here on this slide comes from a book from the Getty Museum. They did a beautiful book on value characteristics and how to classify objects. An excellent work that's used throughout the professional personal property trade. And so we basically go by this little list on everything that we go out to appraise. And on the next slide, you'll see the list continues. That we look at the color, the condition, the craft technique, and the appraiser's evaluation of the thing, which is of all of the colonial lowboy I have seen in my 50-year career, this particular object measures up as being the best masterpiece of what I've seen and what I've researched. The evaluation tends to put the object into a relative position. And it gets supported with the finish, the form, the function, the history of the ownership. Sometimes that plays a big role. And you're going to see that later on at the end of this presentation on some flags I'm going to show you. The material, the ornamentation, the style, and of course, the trade practice. So personal property appraisers are looking at things that are maybe a little bit more diversified than what you see in real estate. On the next slide, you'll see what the biggest fear we have. This is what keeps me up at night. Fakes. It keeps me up at night because they're damn good. The Chinese are absolute masters of imitation. The works that I have seen that are fake are just absolutely stunning. So, quick story. I was in Brooklyn, New York at a ASA conference and sitting at a desk, and in front of me was a Federal Bureau of Investigation agent, FBI. You know the type with 5% body fat and short hair, and I think maybe 30 years old tops, wearing a black suit, black tie, and white shirt with no sense of humor. And he held up two paintings in front of me. He said, "Richard, which one of these is real and which one of these is fake?" They're both works by Marc Chagall. And they were absolutely identical. And I said, "Well, can I see the back?" And so he flipped them around. And I said, "Can you put them so that they're just about touching each other and turn them on the side?" And he did all that. And I said, "I don't see any difference." And he said, "Neither do we." And I said, "Can you tell me where these came from?" He said, "Yeah. This one was consigned at auction in Sotheby's. This one was consigned at auction in Christie's at the same time by two different people to be sold at the same time, and they're absolutely identical. Obviously, someone's creating fakes in the marketplace. Another quick story is that I got called to do praise a Amadeo Modigliani painting of a young woman. The title of the work was Le jeune fille avec les yeux bleus, young woman with blue eyes. I went into, and you all know this building on the Southeast Expressway. It looks like it's got a lock on it. It's got like a chain and a lock hanging on it. I think it's called the Fortress. Well, to go in there is just like the Da Vinci Code. You outside, you have to look into a device that takes a picture of your retina. You have to carry two forms of identification. You walk into an airlock. On the airlock, you have to put your briefcase down on a conveyor belt, which goes into the building and out of your sight. Then they speak to you through a public address system, allowing you to enter the building. Meanwhile, you're being x-rayed, and when they bring in, they give you your, and of course, I'm standing in front of 3 FBI agents, and there's a central corridor, and on each side of the corridor, there's these doors, like garage doors. And so the FBI agent walks up to one of the doors and hits a keypad, and the door opens up, and inside is a dome-shaped corrugated metal container that you see gets loaded on airplanes. You know what I'm talking about? They look like tiny, tiny Quonset huts. And there was a door on the little, and he hits the keypad and he opens up the door, and there's on the floor of the unit is craft paper wrapped up, and in there is the Amadeo Modigliani. And I said to him, these guys have no sense of humor. I said, you're going to carry that to the conference room, because I'm not going to carry it. I might drop it. We get into the conference room, and I'm looking at the fluorescent lights, and I'm thinking, oh man, what crappy lighting. Not even a smile off of the FBI guy. So I'm with another appraiser. We're looking at the piece, and man, this piece looks good. But there's no history of Amadeo Modigliani ever painting Le jeune fille avec les yeux bleus in all of the records of Amadeo Modigliani. And so we have a problem. We cannot trace the provenance, the history of the ownership of the Amadeo Modigliani. We looked and looked and looked. The other appraiser flew to Paris, France, to meet with an authority on Amadeo Modigliani, and they agreed in Paris that this could not possibly be a real Amadeo Modigliani. We appraised this work at $600,000. It was good. It sold at Christie's for $900,000, a fake. That's why I have trouble sleeping at night. The fakes are incredible. So the problem that we're here to solve is that I specialize in insurance and divorce, estate tax, and charitable contributions. And I want to give you a kind of an example of each of these before we leave today. The next slide, I want to show you one of the appraisal reports I'm going to show you is that JFK, when he was on the PT boat, had a chief of staff. I forget what they call the second guy in command on a PT boat, but it's something like the Grand Poobah of PT boats. He was there when the boat got hit, and he and John Kennedy survived, and they became close friends. But this guy died in an automobile accident shortly after he got out of the service. And John Kennedy, Jack, sent him some memorabilia before he died when they were buddies, and it got lost. The stuff it was in a condo that burned down. And so the family said, well, Richard, how much was this stuff worth? I said, well, what was it? And they said, well, we really don't know what it was, but we'll give you a description. So we're going to talk about that case in detail. On the right-hand side, you're looking at a flag that was used by the 1st Brigade, which was all black, in Rhode Island in 1775, before the Continental Army was established. This flag is about 8 feet wide and about 6 feet tall. It's made out of silk, and that's what's left of it. And if you look at it closely, you'll see there's a little anchor, and we're going to talk about that appraisal report in detail. In the case of divorce, on the next slide, there's typically some contention going on. So the appraiser is typically sitting between two parties that have an opposite interest. One wants a high value, one wants a low value. The appraiser is taking a very, very independent look, a professional independent opinion of value. The scope of work has to be very specific because some people getting divorced are willing to fight over a toilet plunger. It's the truth. They are so angry at each other, they will fight over anything. So the personal property appraiser has to be very careful on the scope of work, determining what is going to get them to a resolution. Because what the appraiser is ultimately looking for is stipulation. Let's get them to agree that the independent professional opinion of value is more likely than not credible and acceptable because the work has been done. That's the whole point of divorce. And oftentimes we're called in by a special master, which is there's a couple getting divorced. They each have a lawyer, and they can't agree. So the judge appoints a special master, which is a lawyer, to be above the two of them to get them to come to a resolution. What the appraiser is looking for is stipulation where everyone can agree that the work has been done, the evidence is there, the evidence is being supported, the value is conclusive, the value is credible, and that there's an abundance of evidence and that there's an abundance of detail, which means these appraisal reports are very difficult to write. They're thick, they're big, they're detailed, very detailed, and the whole purpose of writing the report is that the appraiser has supporting testimony when he gets called to court to be an expert witness. On the next slide, we're going to talk about estates. In the states, the Internal Revenue Service is not an intended user, it's the personal representative. Every personal representative has the right of rejecting a personal property appraiser's report. They don't have to use it. And the personal property appraiser takes that report to the grave, can never tell anybody that they did the estate appraisal on behalf of the personal representative. So if you're appointed a personal representative in a state and you don't like the figures that a personal property appraiser, you can throw the appraisal report in the trash and hire another personal property appraiser. Might come up with the exact same figure, but it's in some cases worth a shot. Typically, the IRS has a few regulations. They adopted USPAP without saying we've adopted USPAP. They basically said everything that's in USPAP is acceptable to us. So if you're going to write an appraisal report for USPAP, for IRS, follow USPAP and you'll stay out of trouble. The IRS also wants to see the estate room by room by room. They want to see a detailed listing by room. They will automatically go into an audit if the item is, any particular item is worth $75,000 or more. There's an art review board in Washington, D.C. that is comprised of antique dealers and professionals in the trade that look at appraisal reports and the items being appraised to make a decision of whether or not they think that the appraiser followed the standard. The work file has to be kept 7 years, just like in real estate. And every report goes to a reviewer in Andover. And just recently, I think they moved it from Andover to Indianapolis or Indiana, I forget. But every report gets read, every report gets opened. Um, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've written over 1,000 reports for appraisal, and only once I ever been called by the Internal Revenue Service on a case. So next slide, personal property. Most attorneys have never seen an appraisal report. The credible reports are reports that basically the report is the work file. I mean, we talk about work files. When you're doing real estate, you might have a lot of work that's never seen in the appraisal report. In personal property, that's not the case. Typically, what you find winds up in the report because you're looking for all the evidence you can find to support your case. So let's look at a few reports. The first I'm going to show you an estate report so that you can actually see a real personal property estate report. Then I'm going to show you an insurance claim report so you can see a real, and we're gonna actually show you the report and show you the pages and show you the pictures so you can see how an appraisal report is done. And then finally, we're gonna show you a very interesting report of the most expensive single piece of personal property I've appraised in my career. So starting with the appraisal, you're looking at a transmittal letter. If we scroll down just a little bit, Steve, so we can see the transmittal letter is basically saying, this is what we're going to do for you. We have absolutely no interest in what we're appraising. We've never appraised it before in the past, which might sound familiar to you. Why we are appraising it, who is going to use the appraisal report, and what the appraisal report is reporting. The transmittal letter and a personal property appraisal report is very much like the transmittal letter in a real estate report. Scroll down, Steve, to the table of contents. And in this case, you can see, look, there's all the things that you're already familiar with. There's the intended user, the definition of value, the method of valuation. There's 3 approaches to valuation being considered. You'll see there's an effective daily appraisal, a confidentiality agreement, market conditions. Doesn't this all sound familiar? Assumptions and limiting conditions. And then everything changes because in the description of personal property, this is an estate. The IRS wants to see room by room, and here are all the rooms detailed. There is a hallway, a kitchen, a parlor, there's a stairwell, there's a dining room, there's bedrooms, and then there's a reconciliation and a certification. So scroll down, Steve, and you'll see, keep going, we'll go right past the comparable sales into the body of the report, and you'll see we specifically state who the intended users are. What's the intended use? The scope of the appraisal. This narrative appraisal report looks just like a real estate narrative appraisal report. It is describing the scope of work in detail of what is the appraiser going to do to be able to come up with a credible conclusion, credible value conclusion. In the definition, as we scroll down, you're going to see the end of the definition has a footnote because every definition has to be sourced to its legal origin. So if we scroll down, Steve, to the footnote on this page, you'll see that I am citing, the definition comes from United States Treasury Regulation, Section 20-2031, Section 1, Paragraph B. That's when the IRS defines what is the fair market value of an estate valuation. And you'll see that when I have other footnotes in here, when we're talking about the value characteristics, what are we going to look at in our scope of work to come up with a value on the items? Scrolling down further, Steve, we're going to go into the effective date and the confidentiality, which is just like yours, and continue to scroll down. The market conditions in every personal property appraisal report are unique and different to the set of personal property that is contained in the appraisal report. There's no boilerplate. So this particular estate that is in this, the subject of this report, was a small little cottage on the edge of a body of water owned by an elderly man long after he retired to sit and watch his final days come to an end in the peace of a nice shore community, and everything in the house he bought at a yard sale. I swear to God. There was nothing in the house that was going to be of any particular value. So as we scroll down, we're talking about what are the market conditions of the things that this guy bought to furnish his house. You know, it's not stuff you're going to see in antique stores because it wasn't that good. It's not stuff that you're going to see on eBay even. So it got to be a real challenge to find the items that this would be good. And the market conditions have gotten really, really challenging. The younger generation, and you know this, if you have children and you've had the conversation, children, do you want this dining room set? They're saying, Mom, Dad, you know, it's a brown. Brown is down. We don't want it. We're going to IKEA because we want something that's modern, and when we're sick of it, we want to throw it out. We really don't want to inherit your furniture. The tastes have changed. Crystal. Nobody's buying crystal anymore. You know, your parents loved crystal. I still think having a glass of scotch out of a crystal tumbler is special, but I'm now in the minority. Um, your diamonds are becoming worth less and less day by day. The whole market is changing, constantly changing. So scrolling down, we have assumptions and conditions, which is very similar to what you have in real estate, except we don't have to deal with hazardous materials. But we're saying basically the same thing. We're saying that we assume everything to be right, and if it's not right, we reserve the right to be able to go back and take a second look. Um, we, we don't do testimony without additional engagement. And scrolling down further, Steve, you'll see that's it. There's only 6 limited conditions in this whole appraisal report. It's really a pretty simple thing. So scrolling down even further, we get into the meat of the appraisal report, and now we're into here's what the personal property is. And in the hallway, we've got a rug and we got a table, and they're not worth much. So we scroll down and you see, you put everything together, it's $100. Big deal. Go into the kitchen. Go into the kitchen. You see there's pictures of the kitchen, and you try to see that now it's a 360-degree view of the kitchen. And scrolling down further, you can see what did we find in the kitchen? Not much. We found $100 worth of stuff in the kitchen. So scrolling down further, we're in the living room. And then you see 4 pictures. So those are the 4 corners of the room so that the IRS agent can say, what did Richard see in this house? Okay, we got a braided rug, we got a chair, we got a table, there's some boxes. I hope Richard tells me what's in those boxes. And we got some stuff on the shelf. And so let's scroll down and let's see what Richard is going to be defining. And there it is right there. We've got assorted books, and these are who the books are. And all together, they're worth $100. And scroll down further, we've got assorted furniture because none of it is particularly expensive. All together, it's only worth $100. Scrolling down further, we go into the parlor. And so by now, you're getting an idea that this is not Bill Gates' house. This is, and so is the IRS agent. The IRS is reading saying, okay, I've got a bookcase, and the bookcase has got 7 fixed shelves, and inside there, what do we got? We've got approximately 200 hardcover books, and they're all mid-century fiction novels, and they're not worth a tinker's damn. So, scrolling down, we go further. We've got a nice couch. That is a nice couch, $200. We got a rug. The rug is showing the agent, look, this is the front of the rug, this is the back of the rug. This is a Karistan wool is that man-made? No, that is machine-made. Very typical with everything else that's in the house. This is not a handmade Persian rug. It's machine-made. Scroll down, Steve. We got a Boston rocker. We keep going down further. We're looking at the stuff in the house. There's a nice mirror, $100. And going down further, we found a painting. Arthur Ward. See, the painting is telling the agent, listen, this is Arthur E. Ward. He was an American. He painted from 1863 to 1928. It's an oil on board. It's a harbor scene. Some it's 12 by 14 crackle. See how the value characteristics I talked to you earlier about the maker, the period, and the valuation. This is how that gets expressed in a personal property appraisal report. So you see the next slide, as you slide down even further, there's another painting by Arthur Ward. So this guy had found a few paintings by Arthur Ward, but they're not worth much. Scroll down further. You can see there's more Arthur Ward, and there's a nice slant front desk. Now that slant front desk, back when I was an auctioneer in the 1980s, would bring $400, $500, $600 at auction all day long. Now you can't give them away. Look at $175. And that is, I believe that's a Maddox. Did I say it's a Maddox? No, it looks just like Maddox, but it's not identified because it didn't have a maker's mark or a maker's label on it. $175. Going down further, we keep going down, go down further, scroll down, Steve. And you'll see we're gonna get out of the living room eventually. Right there, the stairwell, and the idea is the dining room. We're in the dining room, so we're gonna isolate the items that we think are worth more than $100. And then as you scroll down towards the end of the dining room, Steve, you'll see we have one category that says, scroll down further, it says assorted furnishings and decorative accessories. So there it is. We've got a hutch, we got a dining table, a mid-19th century pine chest. All these things together are worth $250. Furniture is dead, 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 dead. Just like rugs. Ever since 9/11, everyone realized that the rugs were supporting terrorism trade. Nobody wants Oriental rugs anymore. What used to be called Oriental rugs are actually Persian rugs. So scrolling down, let's see, we've got a 6-board chest. Scroll down in bedroom number 2. That 6-board chest, again, back in the 1980s, $600,000, $800,000 all day long, because that 6-board chest is probably 19th century. But now, $150 is all you can get for it. Scroll down further, and we can see more and more and more. And Steve, we're just going to race down through all the rest of these because I want to get to the keep going down there, right there. Want to get to the certification statement. This is exactly the same certification report you have in all your appraisal reports. Word for word, exactly the same certification statement. Scroll down, Steve, and you'll see that we get into where did you get the information? That's where I went. I went to Invaluable. I went to P4A, which stands for Prices for Antiques. I went to Art Index to find out Mr. Ward, and I went into Ask Art, and I went into eBay, because the stuff that is in this house is not typically sold at auction. So let's look at some of the sales. In that front hallway, we found a Victorian plant stand. So I found 3 of them that sold within the last 3 years and put the details right here in the appraisal report. So you can see that one sold for $115, one sold for $40, and the third one sold for in Australia $60. That's without the buyer's premium. So we look at those 3. We compare those 3 to the one that's a subject in the hallway, and we do an evaluation of the 3 to the subject and come up with a value for the subject. Scrolling down, You can see the pillowback Windsor chairs, and it's the exact same thing. Scroll down, and you can see the story of civilization, which is a book that we found in the house. And it was written by Will Durant, who was a very famous author. And you can see his books are selling for 60 to 100 bucks a piece. The bookcase, we can scroll down, American Empire sofa that was in the report for 200 bucks. Here you can see $150, $225, $175, right there in the range. The Karistan rug is machine made that we talked about earlier. Scroll down and scroll down more. And you'll see there's the Boston rocker. Steve will keep scrolling down. Federal gilt mirror and the end tables. And here's the artist that we saw. Remember, we saw there were a whole bunch of paintings in this house by Mr. Arthur Ward. So here we're giving the Internal Revenue Service an opportunity to see what Arthur Ward is selling for in the marketplace. And he's not selling for a lot of money. He's selling for $100, $160, $180, $472. There's a winner. But for the most part, Mr. Ward is selling for less than $500. And the more we find, the more we put in the report. So we're looking for an abundance of evidence, an abundance of information to support the value conclusion. So we're gonna scroll right out of this one, Steve, and go into the next one, which is an insurance appraisal. I don't want to run out of time. And I want to spend a little bit of time to point out the differences between a estate appraisal and an insurance appraisal. So if we can scroll down into the transmittal letter, we can see that in this case, we're saying the problem being solved is what all of this stuff disappeared. And the people who owned it are fighting with the insurance company over what it's worth. The insurance company is saying this stuff wasn't worth anything because they don't want to pay. The people say, no. This was Dad's. Dad was on the PT boat with Jack Kennedy. Dad was an important guy, and all this stuff came from Jack Kennedy's hand. You know, this is important stuff. Scroll down, and you'll see exactly what we saw before. There's a table of contents. Scroll down farther, Steve. We're going to go right down past the intended user, go past all that stuff. That's all the same. It's what you saw before. The definition of value is replacement value, not market value. So you're going to see that there's a big explanation a little in the footnote here. In the definition of replacement value, here you see the narrative appraisal report writing written by Roger Durkin, and there's the appraisal principles and procedures written by Henry Babcock, two fabulous, famous appraisers in the marketplace that have talked about how do you determine a replacement value. And just scroll down a little bit more, Steve, and you'll see there's a big explanation on the what's going on with the used value marketplace. Maybe this is a case where the appraiser is getting off on a tangent. I have a real issue with the television program pickers. So I slam them every opportunity I can get. Scroll down, Steve. Television is entertainment. People don't understand that. They think it's reality, and it isn't. So here's the three approaches to value that are discussed, which, you know, just like you saw before. And the effective date, and scroll down further, and the confidentiality and the market conditions. Now, these market conditions that you see here are totally different than the market conditions you saw in the last appraisal report, because every personal property appraisal report has a different market condition discussion because it's specific to the body of things that are contained in the appraisal report. Scroll down, Steve. Limiting conditions are pretty much the same. We can skip over those. And stop right here. This is all the appraiser was given to figure out what this stuff was worth. This is very Spartan. They're basically not telling me anything. And I said to the attorneys who were from out of state, I said, PT boat insignia. Can you help me out there? Well, Richard, we think it was like a patch that you sew on to a jacket. I said, well, that's helpful. What about the Kodak camera in the box with film? Are you kidding me? This is from the PT 109? Well, it's from the war, Rick. Well, that's it. That's all you can get. Well, that's all we know is a Kodak camera in the box with film. That's not much to go on. So, Japanese World War II code books. How many code books? Well, we really don't know, but they were in a box, and when the condo burned down, they get burned up with the condo. So now I'm with a very special problem to be solved of what are these code books worth? So the way I solved the problem is if we scroll down, Steve, go down all the way down to the comparables. Keep scrolling all the way down, go down past the reconciliation. Yep, go right down to the comparables, past the certification, past my qualifications, into there's where I found it now. So let's go to the code books, Steve. Keep going down to the code books because I want to, it's 352 and I want to get to the flag appraisal. Let's see. That's posters. Go to camera. Code books. Look what I found for code books. So what I did was I said, you take a look at what I found in the marketplace for code books and tell me, is this like what you remember you had? Or is what you had something different? But this is what I'm basing my valuation on. Because it's gone, we can't inspect it, we can't look at it, we don't know really what it was because we never really did look at them. Even when we had them, we didn't look at them. They were put in a box and thrown in the closet, and we never opened the box. So you tell me, is this what the code books look like? And scroll down, you'll see we have more code books and more code books, and that's where we made our decision from, just like everything else that was in the appraisal report. So finally, let's go to the last one, Steve, the last appraisal report, which is an interesting appraisal report. This was the state of Rhode Island was given 2 flags by the GAR Rhode Island in 1901. And the governor in Rhode Island in 1901 decided to put the flags up in the State House for the public to see. And so the flags were on display in the State House until around 1980, when Antiques Roadshow became popular and people began to realize, uh-oh, these flags might be worth some money. And the problem, and the people in the Rhode Island government who are responsible for the capital asset management, that was my warning, we only have 5 minutes left. The people who are responsible for these products said, ooh, maybe we better have these looked at for condition and find out how they should be stored to preserve them for the future. Because maybe them being stored in the state house is not a good idea, which turned out to be true. So they hired a person to evaluate the flags, and they decided that they needed to put them into storage in a controlled environment because the environment that we breathe is very caustic and corrosive, and these flags are made out of silk. So scroll down, Steve, to all the way down to we can skip by that. Let's get right down to the property to be appraised. The property to be appraised. There's the history of the flags, the market conditions, which is unique to the flags, and the property to be appraised. District, they're right there. So there you have the flags. That's one of two flags. The flags that they're having appraised were flag from the 1st Brigade and flag from the 2nd Brigade of 1775. The 1st Brigade was all black, the 2nd Brigade was all white. They fought in Roxbury, and the whole history is in this appraisal report. And the pictures that you're looking at, on the right-hand side, you can see what's left of the flag. And on the left-hand side, in my kit, I have a 350 power magnifying glass that attaches to the USB of my Microsoft Surface laptop that I'm talking to you on right now in my office. I bought it on eBay for $7. A 350 power microscope. And that picture that you're looking at on the left is a picture of the silk threads from 1775 to show the reader that this is not artificial silk. This is real silk. This is real silk of the way it was made in 1775. This is an authentic, not a fake flag. I am not saying that it's not a fake. I am saying it's built to be not a fake, because appraisers are not authenticators. This flag is worth $3 million. How did we find that out? Scroll down, Steve, into the supporting documentation. Keep going. That's the second flag. We're going into the, keep going. There you go, right there, Steve, that's pretty good, right there at the reconciliation. Scroll up just a little bit. In the reconciliation, I'm saying, look, I found 4 flags. Lot number 99, that was French and Indian War. It sold on that date, and we have to adjust for time, and we use the Consumer Price Index from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics to do a CPI adjustment between the time it sold and the time of the appraisal, and came up with an adjusted figure. The second one sold, it was Custer's last flag, sold at auction. The third one was 3 flags from the Revolutionary War, sold for $5 million. And the last one was a battle flag, just like the flags that we have, sold for $12 million. And in the appraisal report, farther down, Steve, let's scroll down to the supporting documentation of the actual sales. Go below, yeah, below certificate, almost there. Bingo, right there. You can see the flag research. These are the flags I found. Scroll down further, a little bit further, Steve. Scroll down a little bit further. Yep, there's another one. And scroll down further. These are the flags that are in that chart. And this is all the description and all the history of all the story behind those flags. And there's another one. Boy, that one looks familiar, doesn't it? That is a regiment flag from the Civil War. I mean, from the Revolutionary War. And scroll down even further. So these are good comps. Fascinating. They were all sold in Sotheby's in New York. Sotheby's has the market on selling flags. So, in conclusion, appraising personal property is very similar to appraising real estate, with the exception that the diversity is scary. The value characteristics constantly change depending on what it is that you're appraising. And the education and experience of the appraiser is paramount. It is not a young person's game. Ergo, white beard. It takes time and experience to be able to become personal property appraiser. However, some of you have hobbies with a very deep interest, like coins or stamps, and you've been at it a long time, and you're already an appraiser in real estate, And you could become an appraiser in personal property because you have invested all of that education and experience in that particular thing that you have an interest in. And I encourage you because we need more professional personal property appraisers. That concludes my presentation today. I hope that you enjoyed it. And it's 4:01. Steve, we did it in an hour.
You did, Rick. And what I'd like to do is pause just for a second and see if there's anybody has any questions.
Please.
I'd like to know how long it takes you to do one of these.
I bill by the hour. And estates I can typically do in less than 20 hours. And I
Oh.
bill $200 an hour. So we're talking a $4,000 bill. This is not cheap.
Okay.
I just did a divorce. The divorce was $6,000 appraisal. The insurance appraisal I did that you saw, I think that came in at like 2,200, 2,300, 11 hours. Because it wasn't really a lot to go on. We were looking for things. The flag appraisal I did for the state. I gave them a special rate because I knew it was taxpayer money and I didn't want to hose them. And I wanted to be able to say, I appraised the flags. So I gave them a deal. All right. I think I did that appraisal for, I wanted to do it for $1,775, but I thought that was a little crazy.
Yeah, Rick, one of the things that impressed me in going through, particularly the flag report, was the amount of content and description of the comparable flags. I mean, you must research a lot of history when you're doing an assignment like that versus, let's say, the insurance one where there wasn't all that much you weren't looking at something and then comparing it to something. So what do you use for your references for, all the history? Is it?
It comes with the items. So in the case of the man who was JFK's ensign on the boat, I never even knew he existed until I got the assignment. And it was fascinating. I mean, I got left with his ghost. I mean, I'll never forget him. He died in an automobile accident at a train intersection in Ohio, not even a year after getting out of the service. What a rough deal that is. I mean, here you are touring the country with JFK on a political stumping, and you come to a railroad crossing with another couple in the car and get T-boned by a train. That's not fair.
Yeah.
The flags, I'm just so impressed that the 1st Brigade was all black and the 2nd Brigade was all white. And what was going on in Rhode Island in 1775? These black men wanted their freedom and they were fighting for it.
Well, again, it was incredible to be able to see your reports and the detail that you put into it and the amount of work. And I think, if nothing else, the fees that you just mentioned probably piqued the interest of maybe a few on this call. So
I hope
um,
so.
I would like to express my appreciation for putting the program together and presenting it the way you did. I think you gave us a great understanding of how you do your work, which is similar but different from the way real estate appraisers do their work. And so I'll offer you my virtual round of applause here,
Yes,
and I'm
agreed.
sure we can all do the same. And again, thank you all for attending today. Our next How Do I Value That will be on May 8th. And not to say that Rick didn't do a good job, but we're going to be bringing in another personal property appraiser, Layla Dunbar, probably from a TV show that Rick doesn't like, but it's Appraisers Road, Antique Roadshow. And she'll be in here on May 8th. So we'll be putting a notice out on that. So again, thank you, Rick. Thank you all for joining us today and have a wonderful evening.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.